Continue with the other part of my talk, that is about the management or treatment for lung cancer. And in this section what I will try to tell you, I will just tell you about the diagnostic modalities for lung cancer as well as the staging, and then we will come to the real treatment or management part of it, because the diagnostic aspect as well as the the staging, they are also very important because they decide about your treatment approach. So, now coming to the diagnostic approach to lung cancer, obviously the most important thing is clinical, which we must not forget, and then after we have got a clinical approach, then we have to exactly get the biopsy of the lung tissues. That includes the standard bronchoscopy, the EBUS, both the what we call as the endobronchial ultrasound bronchoscopy, then the navigational bronchoscopy, then the TTNA or the transthoracic needle aspiration or the true cut biopsy, and then open surgical biopsy or VATS. Before that, even wherever feasible, the sputum cytology and then the getting samples from the metastatic sites is also important to get to get a exact histology of the lung cancer. Then not only the primary one, you have to also try to assess the lymph node involvement. The various modalities will include the mediastinoscopy, EBUS, and then the esophageal or the endoscopy ultrasound guided fine needle aspiration, or what we call as the EUS FNA, and then the obviously evaluation of pleural fluid like thoracentesis and thoracoscopy. Now, you see, if we see the clinical approach, you see whenever the duration of symptoms of lung cancer actually less than 3 months, about a third, 30 to 40% of the patients, then about another 15 to 35% of cases will have symptom from 3 to 6 months, and then about another 20-25% of cases will have symptoms for more than 6 months. The most important thing in this country, we should remember that most of the cases of lung cancer are treated as tuberculosis for varying periods of time before a diagnosis is made, but I will tell you why it is so. You see, this is the demographic data also, you have to know, as I have already hinted to you, this is more common in males, the mean age is about 52, 54, that is beyond 50 years, and then it is more common in case of smokers. So, these are the type of things you should suspect that any respiratory symptom, as we will be seeing in the next slide. You can see what are the main presenting symptoms, that is cough with expectoration. There are two different series, that is the our own study of over 1000 cases, and the other Indian studies. You see cough with expectoration, it is very common, you can see because it is but it is very non-specific. Then breathlessness, then the chest pain, it is a very important symptom of about 50 to more than 50% of the cases will complain of chest pain. Then hemoptysis, about 60 to 70% of cases. Then some of the systemic features like weight loss, anorexia, fever, weakness, they are again very common symptoms. And then the swelling of face, or what we call as the SBC obstruction, is about 10 to 20% of cases. Hoarseness of voice, about 30% of cases. Dysphagia in another 10 to 20% of cases, and then various other symptoms. You see, what I was telling you, most cases are misdiagnosed as tuberculosis, because you see many of the symptoms like anorexia, weight loss, hemoptysis, fever, weakness, these are the some of the symptoms which are common both to TB as well as lung cancer. So, the clinician, if he is not familiar, he will just first think of TB, and secondly TB is a more common disease, more commoner disease than lung cancer. But however, if you are taking a very carefully clinical history, say for example chest pain, which is usually pleuritic or non-pleuritic continuous pain, is not a usual feature of tuberculosis. Secondly, I have already told you the age beyond 50, although it is not unusual to have TB beyond 50, but in the elderly individual you have to suspect lung cancer very seriously. If it is a smoker, again same thing, they may be non-specific. A smoker can have TB also, but we should be little careful about that. Then the other, but however, some of the symptoms are very specific and characteristic, like swelling of face, SBC obstruction. In an elderly male, if he is having features of SBC obstruction, then it is very unlikely to be a case of tuberculosis. Same thing with hoarseness of voice. It is not common with TB, but more common in case of more in case of malignancy. Same also dysphagia. Then you see, these are the clinico-radiological features. Again, we have seen that is the presence of mass or collapse. I think if you are doing a careful clinical examination of the patient, the presence of a mass lesion or a collapse is not a usual feature of TB in an adult, particularly in an elderly individual. If there is a cavitary mass on a radiology, here the cavity of a TB and the cavity of a malignancy is different. In malignancy, it is usually eccentric, it is usually nodular, irregular, and the cavitation will be eccentric. On the other hand, in a tubercular cavity, what you see, it is thin walled, there can be associated consolidation, right. Then a pleural effusion, hemorrhagic pleural effusion, it is very unusual in a adult male in case of has it been tuberculosis, because malignant pleural effusion is usually hemorrhagic. SB syndrome, I have already told you. Presence of clubbing is again clubbing or hypertrophic pulmonary osteoarthropathy. They are more common in cancer rather than tuberculosis. Then Horner syndrome, hypertrophic pulmonary osteoarthropathy, rib erosion, phrenic nerve palsy, and then these are more common in malignancy rather than tuberculosis. Maybe of course the COPD may be associated with lung cancer. TB even can be associated with malignancy, both TB and malignancy. We have to be little careful. Then obviously metastatic sites like heart, lymph nodes, skin nodules, liver metastases, bone metastases, non-metastatic complications, like what we call as the non-metastatic complication, which may be hematological, it may be skin, it may be CNS, it may be hemolytic, the hematological, so on and so forth will be the son of the non-metastatic complication, and anemia, which of course can occur in both TB and lung cancer. So, these are some of the clinico-radiological features of lung cancer. So, now coming to the the other diagnostic modalities, then we have to, of course, we have to do a chest X-ray and a CT scan. I am not going to discuss that in because of paucity of time, because we have to finish it within time. So, these are of course two next important steps of going for a chest X-ray and the CT scan, and then we have to go for, depending on that, we go for bronchoscopy. In endobronchial visible lesions, it will correctly diagnose the lesion in 94 of cases, and one has to take at least 4 to 5 samples, and then fluorescent bronchoscopy used for the screening. However, the disadvantage reliability seems to depend on the location of the tumor. If it is peripheral, you may miss it, and then adequate sampling is critical, particularly when, as I talked to you about the mutation studies. So, the adequate sampling is very critical. You see, this is our own data from PGI. You see, these are we have done about 11,000 bronchoscopy from 1979 to 2001, and then again this is overall up to 2002, over the period of 78 to 2002. You see, the most common indication is pulmonary malignancy. You can see here the blue one, the upper one is the green, that shows that from different years. The next one is the most common indication of bronchoscopy is a pulmonary malignancy. And then again, if we have actually tried to summarize our experience between 79 to 2013. So, it is a total of nearly 25,000 bronchoscopies that are carried out in PGI Chandigarh, and then the mean age of the patients was about 48 years, with about 70% were males. The number of procedures performed per decade showed an absolute increase by more than 300%, and the most common indication is suspected bronchogenic carcinoma in about a third of cases. So, then the other one, then obviously the investigations for diagnosis of lung cancer If it is a central tumor, it is the endobronchial biopsy through the bronchoscope. Then a peripheral lesion, you do a CT guided biopsy or a FNAC, or you can do even a radial EBUS guided TBLB. If you for the mediastinal lymph nodes and or central mass with no endobronchial component, then you can go for transbronchial needle aspiration, and you can go for conventional or linear EBUS guided FNAC. Then a pleural effusion, if there is pleural effusion, do the pleural fluid analysis or thoracoscopic pleural biopsy. Then if it is peripheral palpable lymph nodes or subcutaneous swellings, then go for biopsy or FNAC. Then metastasis with unknown primary, then we have to go for image guided FNAC, biopsy of the metastatic site. The image guided may be a CT guided, may be ultrasound guided, or even it may be PET guided. The PET guided has the advantage that it will avoid the surrounding necrosis or the reactive areas, but actually you can hit the tumor directly, right. So, then coming to the staging of lung cancer, we have to do a locoregional staging, which is called the nodal staging and the primary tumor staging, and then distant staging will be for assessment for metastatic disease. Then these are the various comparison of various nodal staging techniques, mediastinoscopy, which is conventional, cervical mediastinoscopy, the sensitivity is 80% and the specificity is 100%. You are doing a direct mediastinoscopy, then extended cervical mediastinoscopy, then sensitivity increases, then endosonography, that is esophageal ultrasound guided FNAC or conventional TBNA or EBUS TBNA, then EBUS TBNA plus esophageal ultrasound, then TBNA. So, then depending upon the nodal stations, which I will show you in the subsequent slide, because each procedure has some limitation for particular lymph node stations, and usually who has to do, most of the time you can see the pulmonologist can do it, even the mediastinoscopy has to be done by a surgeon. Obviously, no pulmonologist does a mediastinoscopy. Then role of PET CT scan, what do various societies say? I mean, whether we should do a routine PET CT or not, it is controversial, but however, under one or two situations where PET CT should be done, if there is no obvious metastatic disease on initial imaging or clinical evaluation, and the patient is planned for curative intent surgery or radiation or chemoradiation, then you have to exactly find out the extent of the disease, so that the stage will vary accordingly. Then MRI brain for detection of CNS metastasis is not needed in all cases. No definite consensus or opinion is possible, and possibly best thing is to, when the patient is symptomatic, we have to do it. Then conventional TBNA, that is technique for performing cytological, histological or microbiological sampling, and then it can access right and left paratracheal spaces, lymph node station 4L and 4R, and the subcarinal space, that is level 7, then best for 4 and 7 stations. These are the various lymph node stations. You can see there are 11 different stations, both left and right side. The upper one is the innominate vein adjacent one R and one left, that is left and right side, station 1, then 2, that is the paratracheal, then the aorta. These are the two dangerous sites, the 6 and 5, then 4 is the azygous vein, and 4L will be around that area, 7, 8, 9 and 10, 11 they are shown. These are the different lymph node stations. One should, those who are doing particularly EBUS, they should be very very well conversant with these stations. Then for the TBNA, one has to select for the proper needle, it should be a particular length, and then they should be retractable in design. The conventional, or what we call the blind TBNA, the sensitivity is low, it depends on the operator, lymph node size and station. There is a high false negative rate, requires negative results to be confirmed by invasive procedure. Many operators are so discouraged by the results of their initial experience that only 20 to 30% of pulmonologists use transbronchial needle aspiration through the bronchoscope. Then the TBNA major complications are rare. There can be minor complications like cell-limited minor bleeding, pneumothorax about 2 to 3%, and inadvertent puncture of adjacent structures and damage to the bronchoscope. Then this is our own experience with blind TBNA, over 4,500 bronchoscopies. So, it is a diagnostic accuracy will be in about 50% of cases. So, this is the convex probe EBUS. So, it is available since 2005, you have to have a dedicated FOV, and then the resolution is up to 5 centimeter depth. It is actually in fact is a real time visualization of the needle puncture, the fiber optic lens at 35 degrees oblique angle, and the dedicated needle is required, which is in fact is a costly one. It is around 10,000 plus minus, and then these are the different EBUS TBNA for lung cancer staging by different authors, that is a review. These are the total cases, then selected patient, you can see very large number of patients. So, the pooled sensitivity about 0.93 and a pooled specificity about 100%. Then it is our own experience of till July, it was installed with us in July 2011, and then it is till 2013 we have done about EBUS 424. The yield in malignancy about 90% of cases, and yield in sarcoidosis is 78% of cases. Then this is a procedure, I think I can show you the video, but this is a real time, as I was telling you, through the ultrasound guided one. Then coming to medical thoracoscopy, it is performed in an operating room or an endoscopy suite under local anesthesia and intravenous sedation. The objective is to visualize and when necessary perform biopsies of the parietal pleural surface. So, this is the rigid or semi-rigid thoracoscopy, these are the various components, and then so point is it safe? Yes, death is extremely rare. So, data from 47 studies, death occurred in around 0.34% of cases only, and then 28 diagnostic thoracoscopy studies alone, the combined mortality rate was almost 0. The 19 studies involving talc fluorase, the powderage which is done for fluorodesis, the combined mortality is again only 0.7%. So, the comparable to that of a transbronchial biopsy and mediastinoscopy, and again as I told you, it can be done by a pulmonologist. However, although risks are low, precautions should include monitoring the coagulation profile before the procedure. There should be strict asepsis measures, monitoring of cardiac rhythm and oxygenation, not appropriate in terminally ill patients, and it should be performed only if it is likely to affect the management. So, again I can show you the video, but you can see on the left hand side, this is how the pleural surface will look like, and then after doing the biopsy how it is coming out. Then PET, the positron emission tomography, then overall sensitivity of around 97% and a specificity of about 78% for detecting malignancy. For benign nodules it is again very highly sensitive, and then the resolution, the currently it is only the 7 to 8 millimeters, and imaging of solitary pulmonary nodules less than 1 centimeter is unreliable. But again for this country be careful, the tuberculosis as well as sarcoidosis can also become PET positive. So, one should be careful about that. So, the PET scanning is usually recommended for the low risk patients to confirm a benign diagnosis, the high risk marginal surgical patient to confirm a malignant diagnosis, possibly for the patient with suspected metastatic disease to rule out other sites of primary disease. And then of course, I have told you now many centers are using this PET guided FNAC, because that will exactly tell you which was the diseased. Suppose you are getting a mass lesion or a nodule, then the surrounding necrosis and other things by blindingly or within CT you cannot know where you are hitting, but under PET guided you can hit directly the tumor tissue. So, that is used in many centers, but again the point is it is very costly, not available everywhere, and you should be careful about that. Then that is very, before going to the treatment part, again lung cancer histology we have already told you different types. So, the WHO classification of tumors of 2004, these are the squamous cell, the small cell carcinoma and the other ones, and then the large cell and the adenosquamous, that was 2004. But however, in 2015 the WHO has come out of the new classification, because of various prognosis, and as I was discussed in detail in the earlier part of my lecture, how the adenocarcinoma has to be, you have to do the mutation studies and the targeted therapy, and also the type of chemotherapy will be different if it is adenocarcinoma and if it is non-adenocarcinoma. So, it is very important to have accurate WHO classification. You see now there is some change, I am not going into detail. It is still the adenocarcinoma, squamous cell carcinoma, large cell and neuroendocrine tumors, but again there are certain the subtypes, that is pre-invasive lesions for adenocarcinoma, and then minimally invasive adenocarcinoma, invasive adenocarcinoma, and various grades. So, and then the squamous cell, it should be keratinizing or non-keratinizing, and a bacilloid carcinoma. Then the large cell carcinoma is having a null ISC features, then available whether it is TTF positive or P40 positive, and carcinoid tumors. Again, these are maybe the pathological curiosities, but I think from management of point of view, as long as you are doing it is adeno, squamous, large or neuroendocrine, with further mutation studies it should be good enough for you. But I think for you people, you just know that there is a new lung cancer classification by WHO in 2015, particularly for adenocarcinoma. You see, it all depends on the type, the prognosis will be, or the response to therapy will vary. Now, these are the international classification of lung adenocarcinoma, as I have already told you, and how it should be done, they have given a guideline. The next thing is the staging of lung cancer, because as you will see subsequently, depending on the stage of the disease, the treatment approach also will vary. So, the staging of cancer, any cancer at the time of diagnosis, is the most important predictor for survival and the treatment options based on the stage. TNM starts with the T for tumor, N for node, and M for metastasis. So, that is which is known as commonly TNM classification for all cancers in fact. So, the same thing is adopted for lung cancer also. So, there is a significant change in the TNM staging over the years. Actually, the current classification by UICC, that is the TNM, it is a prognostic factor. So, there are several updates, as I told you. The 6th edition of lung cancer TNM staging was released in 2002, and then the 7th edition of TNM classification in non-small cell lung cancer, that is the latest one, and the 8th edition is about to be released, but I think so far it is the 7th classification, that is the International Association for Study of Lung Cancer staging, and this was published in 2007 in Journal of Thoracic Oncology. So, without going into details, because it is not possible for all of you neither to remember it, neither it may be possible for you. So, for TNM, T is the tumor size, it is T1 is subclassified into T1A and T1B. Basically, it depends on the tumor size, whether it is 2 or less than 2 centimeters up to 7 or more than 7 centimeter in size. So, if it is 2 or less than 2 centimeter, it is called as a T1A tumor, and if it is between 2 to 3 centimeters, it is called as T1B tumor. Then T2, it is the size is between 3 to 7 centimeter, right. So, T2A tumor will be between 3 to 5 centimeter and more than 3 to 5 centimeter, and T2B will be more than 5 centimeter to 7 or less than 7 centimeter, right. And then the T tumor is reclassified. If it is more than 7 centimeter, it is classified as T3. So, then the T4 tumor was reclassified due to additional tumor nodules in the primary lobe as T3. So, which was earlier T4, now if you have got additional tumor nodules in the same lobule, so it is it is still classified as T3. So, then if there is a malignant pleural effusion, as per the previous the 6th edition classification, it was the T4 tumor is a malignant pleural, it was called as T4. So, now it is known as M1, and then a creation of a M1 category, that I will come subsequently. Then the summary of changes to node and a metastatic description. So, the current N classification is retained. So, that will be showing in the some pictures. Then reclassify metastatic, that is M1 or M0. M1 means metastasis. So, M1 due to additional tumor nodule in other ipsilateral lobes as T4, and then reclassify M1 due to additional tumor nodules in the contralateral lung, it was M1A, and then reclassify M1 due to distant metastasis as M1B. So, these are the some of the changes. So, this is actually this international database over a period of it is over 1 lakh cases throughout the world, and then they have made these are different types of their prognostication, and this new classification has come up. So, for example, T1A, as I was telling, this is the tumor size, what is tumor is 2 centimeter or less than that. So, then there is superficially spreading tumor of any size with its, so there are various description, you can go into that, and T1B will be tumor between 2 to 3 centimeter, more than 2 to less than 3 centimeter, as I told you. T2A, again it is the same way, as you can see, it is more than 3 centimeter to 5 centimeter, and if the invasion of the visceral pleura is also included in T2A. So, earlier it was taken as a local invasion, and T2B is between more than 5 centimeter to 7 centimeter and less, right. So, the T factor recommendation is based on basically tumor size. So, as I told you, T1 tumor can be divided in T1A or T1B, and a T2 tumor can be divided in T2A, and then tumor more than 7 centimeters in greatest dimension can be classified as T3. So, similarly, you can see this is the tumor more than 7 centimeter. If the tumor is invading, so the larger vessel, the pericardium or the other lobe, then diaphragmatic invasion or the invasion of pericardial, parietal pleura, this is what is T3 lesion. And then the for other T description, that is tumor with additional nodules in the same lobe, can be classified as a T3, as I told you. Tumor with additional nodules in another ipsilateral lobe can be classified as a T4, and a pleural dissemination can be classified as M1. So, this is the T4 disease. As you can see, tumor invades the trachea and our superior vena, the SVC, superior vena cava, or if it is tumor involves the carina, tumor is invades the vertebra, or the tumor invades the aorta, major vessels, and then tumor invades the esophagus, mediastinum, and or the heart. So, these are the T4 tumors depending upon the size. Then N0, that means just you see at the right hand side, it is only the tumor, there is no lymph node. On the other hand, N1 we tell this is ipsilateral, intrapulmonary, peribronchial and hilar node, by direct extension, as you can see, this is called was N1 lesion, and N2 lesion, again you see this is the primary in the right upper lobe, and then you see here the metastasis in ipsilateral, mediastinal and or subcarinal lymph nodes, including the skip metastasis without N1 involvement, if it is to the other side. And then again it is ipsilateral, mediastinal and subcarinal lymph nodes by extension from N1 disease. Then N3, it is metastasis to the contralateral hilar, to the other side, to the hilar, mediastinal or the scalene supraclavicular lymph nodes, we call it N3. You see the lesion is here and it is contralateral on the left side, the primary lesion in the left lower lobe, and it has metastasis to the other mediastinum, other side, and then the the scalene supraclavicular nodes are involved. So, this is N3 lesion. So, similarly, so this is the reconciled Naruke and the mountain Dressler nodal charts. These are the different areas. I think that is how the lymph nodes are situated. Then the M factor is a recommendation for M or metastatic descriptor, reclassify pleural dissemination, malignant pleural or pericardial effusion, pleural nodules from T4 to M1A, as I have told you, subclassify M1 by additional nodules in the contralateral lead as M1A, subclassify M1 by distant metastasis as M1B, that is outside the lung or pleura. So, this is M1 disease, as you can see this is a nodule in the right, I mean the mass in the right upper lobe, and then there is pleural nodules and the pericardial effusion. So, this is M1A disease. M1B disease, it is, as you can see, it is the other, it is the brain, it is the bone in the what we call as the ribs, and then the liver, the adrenals. So, this is M1B disease. So now the incorporate the proposed change to T and M, reclassify the T2A N1 tumors, reclassify T2B N0 tumors, and reclassify T4 N0 and T4 N1 tumors, and then this is what this looks little complicated to you, how depending upon how the stage has changed from 7th edition. So, depending on the size, now we have got different stages. 1A is up to T1B. So, T2A is E1B. So, like this, I think it will be, I may not just repeat that, because you have to have anybody dealing with this, or if you want to remember, you just please look into the chart. If I go on reading everything, neither you can remember, neither it will be useful, it will be boring for you. So, please go through that, and how with this classification the things have changed from 6th to the 7th staging. Again, why this pathological staging is done, you see, it is just not done, I told you, over 1 lakh cases. You see, there is a clear cut distinction. You see the survival of 5 year or 10 year, 8 year survival. As you see, the top one is the 1A. If it the disease at stage 1A, the survival is much better in comparison to stage 4 or 3B or 3A, like this. So, these are based on facts, based on observations throughout the country. So, then these are the stage groups. So, I am not going to tell you that, and then so you have to go for a nodal staging, either using the PET and CT scan, see both CT and PET. If they are negative for mediastinal nodes and no central tumor or hilar annual node, so then you go for upfront surgery, because there is no involvement. Then if there are CT or PET positive for mediastinal nodes, then you have to, whether it is a bulky mediastinal nodes, then accordingly you decide, that will tell you subsequently. So, step 1 for staging is the PET or CT scan, step 2 is the endosonographic sampling from the lymph nodes, and step 3 is invasive mediastinal sampling if it is negative. And then the what next for lung cancer staging. So, this TNM classification, there are certain deficiencies, because the role of PET scan is not exactly defined here, although that is the recommendation, but during the staging they had not taken that into consideration. But they have also not told that if it is lymphangitis carcinomatosis, so what will be the stage, they have not told that. And again, some of the important continents, like most of the Southeast Asian countries and African countries, actually they are not included in this data of 1 lakh. So, actually what is happening there, so I think they are to be included. So, there is a 8th edition of the staging is coming up. So, these are some of the deficiencies I have already told you. So, then the EBOS has an important role, we have already told you. Then the comparison of various nodal staging, the mediastinoscopy obviously is the gold standard. Then this is the endosonography is a committee, it has got a very emerging role. Then the FDG PET scan, I have already commented about that. So, with this I thank you all for your kind attention.